Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first live edition of Engineering Change podcast. Something new we're trying because we've been a little absent lately, and we're really sorry about that. Um, Engineering Change is a podcast by ACEC Georgia, where we explore the intersection between politics, leadership, and engineering. And joining me this week and almost every week is my one, my only, Michael Sully Sullivan.
Aw, so sweet.
Yeah, well,
Thank-
I didn't say what you were the one only of.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Well, don't tell me. I'm sure it's hurtful. But otherwise, it is nice to be back in the podcast studio and
Yeah.
sitting with you and chatting about stuff and sharing things with our members.
Yeah, it's going to be really great. If you are watching this either live or after the fact on social media, you can comment in the comment section, and we will see it. And if it's worthy, we'll respond to it. If it's just like, hey, you guys kind of suck at this, we'll take that as criticism and file it away in our self-esteem and never speak of it again.
Yes, let us know how it looks. Let us know how it sounds. Let us know if it's glitchy.
Yeah.
Just share that information in the comments. And since we are live, for those of you that are live, feel free to, if you got any questions or comments, feel free to include those in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Speaking of social media and comments,
Yeah.
we got a nice little comment in our social media platform, our LinkedIn platform yesterday.
Yeah.
We got a like, and to be clear, all of your likes are equal. We love everybody just the same, but we got a like from, well, none of you guys, as far as I know, that are watching. Perhaps some of you are, but as far as I know, nobody watching or listening is a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
No, I mean, if you are, go ahead and let us know in the comment section.
Yeah, please
But-
do. But we got a like to one of our LinkedIn social media posts from REM,
Yeah.
official REM HQ.
4.1 million followers. And they
That's-
liked our
that is
picture.
a few more followers than ACC Georgia has.
One or two.
But
million.
yeah, no, that was pretty cool to have one of your favorite rock bands like your social media post. Of course, they were liking a post that we posted about REM. We a couple weeks ago we had the latest edition of the Infrastructure Roadshow, Engineering and Infrastructure Roadshow, that's co-sponsored by ACEC, APWA, and ASCE.
Mm-hmm.
That was over in Athens, where we were honoring Kimley Horn for their amazing engineering feat in taking what is known as the Murmur trestle. It's a old railroad trestle from the 1800s that appeared on the back cover of REM's first album, Murmur.
Yep.
And because it appeared on the first album back cover, it's become kind of a mecca, a place that people make a pilgrimage to. Let me go see the Murmur trestle while I'm in Athens. And it was falling apart when they took the picture, and it didn't get any better in the intervening 30 or 40 years. It was just about to have to come down. And the city of Athens, Clark County, reached out to Kimley Horn and hired them to figure out a way to save the trestle.
Yep.
And they didn't just save the trestle, they completely reconstructed it. It'll last for generations to come. And it's part of the Firefly Trail, a 59 mile walking trail. When it's finished, it'll be that. And it's a pedestrian and biking bridge that's part of that trail. So it's useful.
Yeah.
It's integrated into the community, and it's still a historical location.
And it was cool being there at it and seeing it being used. Like, we're having this ceremony honoring this project, and people are walking across and stopping and looking down and watching the ceremony. And it was a really cool experience.
Yeah, it was nice. I think we actually had some people that started on the
top
trestle
and then
came down to see what was going on.
Well,
and,
once they saw one of our guests, it was probably.
Well, I mean, again, not to reference the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, but we did have Peter Buck, lead guitarist for REM and member of the Georgia Music Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Songwriters Hall of Fame. He came by with his daughters and attended the whole ceremony. It was great to have one of the four members of REM there with us as we celebrated them on their 45th anniversary, sort of. Yeah. Their 45th anniversary is actually April 5th. That's the anniversary of the first time they played in public as a band, but they didn't have a name yet. 2 weeks later, on April 19th, they actually performed for the first time as REM, and our event was on April 19th, celebrating their 45th anniversary as a band.
It's a very cool day.
Yeah.
Very cool day.
Yeah, it was really cool. Actually, it was really hot.
It was quite hot. Hotter than it was today.
Sun was beaming down on us, but yeah, it was a great event and great to celebrate amazing infrastructure and the engineering creativity that goes into making it.
Yeah, definitely.
Great project.
That's just one of the many events we've had going on. And reason that we've been a little irregular.
We've been busy.
We've been busy.
We've been busy. We've
and
been
so
different cities, different places.
Yeah, man, we've just been everywhere. I mean, for a day we flew down to Florida and back during this
We
time.
did. That's right. We did. Yeah, flew back to do a site visit for the upcoming Georgia Engineers Summer Conference.
Yeah.
If you haven't registered, you can hop on the ACC Georgia website and register for the Georgia Engineers Summer Conference. We've got a great conference plan, great content, beautiful Omni Amelia Island right on the beach, on the Atlantic beach, and great connections, great networking opportunities, lots of folks that you want to spend time with. We'd love to have you come down. But yeah, that was a long day.
Yeah, that was a
flying
long
down
day.
and back. And yeah, we've had our annual strategic planning retreat in Savannah. Was that 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago,
almost. Great content, great discussion. We did a SWOT analysis of ACC Georgia,
led by our incoming chair, Holly Painter.
He did a masterful job of leading that discussion. It was a really good discussion, and not trying to sell you guys on this podcast or anything, but one of the cool things about that strategic planning retreat, when I started in 2012, the strategic planning retreat was really just a board retreat. It was the board of directors. And for the last 3 years, at least, we've had more regular members attend the planning retreat than board members. And it's not because their board members aren't attending. The board members are attending, but in addition to them, we have regular folks who are part of ACC Georgia and want to come down and discuss the future direction of the organization. And the way that strategic planning retreat is structured, it's not the board having a discussion and everybody else watching. Everybody participates equally, board members, former board members, future board members, regular members, and you get some really good ideas with that size crowd.
What I love about it is when I've done stuff like this in the past with other nonprofits I've worked for is you get that level of participation when there's something wrong with the organization. Both ACEC Georgia, these people are just really excited about everything that's going on and want to be part of that future. And it's just a really cool breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it really is cool. And so if you ever want to have some input on ACC Georgia's future, you actually don't have to come to the strategic planning retreat. You can just call one of us. My cell phone number is on the website, my email address, Brett's as well. But if you really want to dig in and spend a couple of days thinking deeply about the strategic direction of our organization, we'd love to have you come to Savannah next April.
It's a fun trip.
Yeah. And Savannah's not too bad a place to hang out.
No, not at all.
Pretty fun.
So one of the things you've been busy with, or were busy with, was the legislative session. Technically, we're still in the governor's review period for legislation that was passed, so it's not.
Yep. The legislative, under the Constitution of Georgia, the legislature has to go into session on the second Monday of January, and then the only other thing they have to do is pass a budget. They can meet for up to 40 days, but they can't meet for more than 40 days. And then whenever they adjourn, sine die, that's their final adjournment for the session, the governor then has 40 days, calendar days, to review the legislation that was passed by the General Assembly and decide whether it's legislation that he wants to sign into law or legislation that he wants to veto. Technically, he can neither sign it nor veto it, and that becomes law in the absence of either of those things happening. But very rarely is that done. It's usually just signed into law or vetoed. So the governor's review period and legislative review period ends next Thursday, I believe.
Okay.
So, yeah, technically we're still in the legislative process in the sense that there are bills that have not been signed or vetoed yet, and that's not unusual. Most governors wait until, I won't say the last possible minute, but usually it's the last 2 or 3 days to give them the maximum amount of time to review the legislation, and not just review the legislation academically, what do the words say and what will this do, but to reach out to potentially affected stakeholders and get their opinions before and against, and make a determination based on the folks that will be affected by that legislation. But we had a good legislative session. We had 4 primary legislative goals, 2 of which we wrote and introduced, and 2 of which we were very much in support of. The big one, the one that affects everybody inside and outside the engineering industry, is tort reform. Tort reform was actually 2 bills, Senate Bill 68, 69, that were, it was a fairly substantial, some might say generationally impactful piece of legislation, but really, when you boil it down, it was kind of the reasonable compromise.
Mm-hmm.
The business community wasn't asking for, people's ability to go to court and sue for a redress of grievances or some sort of damage that they've received. It was just the reasonable, this isn't fair. This shouldn't be the law. A great example of that is up until, July 1st of this year, it is currently impermissible to introduce evidence of whether someone who's been injured in a car accident, who's been injured and they're suing for their damages, it is illegal to introduce evidence that they weren't wearing their seatbelt or that they were. You cannot introduce that.
It's so funny. I just heard one of the many law firm commercials on my way in this morning about a client who was ejected from their car during an accident. Now, that could happen for any number of reasons, but most likely it's they weren't wearing their seatbelt.
Yeah, not 100% of the time, but it is a reasonable assumption that is the case. And you can, in many instances, prove whether or not they were with, forensic electronic research on the car and what happened. A seatbelt looks differently if you were wearing it and you were ejected from the car than if you weren't. But the trial lawyer's argument was that that's information that's too complex for a jury to understand or to weigh, which is crazy when you think about like a medical malpractice claim, where they're dealing with anatomy and physiology and biology and surgical procedures, and they're able to weigh that complexity or a complex business, but not seatbelts. So that's one of the things that goes away. It really resets back to what we believe is the normal or reasonable level relative to premises liability. Under the current judicial understanding of premises liability, you can be held 93% liable for some criminal action that takes place on your property that you didn't have anything to do with, that you could not have foreseen. It just happened to take place on your property. And since it wasn't foreseeable, you couldn't have done anything to stop it. There was a shooting case on a Kroger where the shooter, the person who actually pointed the gun and shot and killed the person whose family sued over those damages, Kroger was found to be 93% liable. The person who actually fired the shot that killed the person was only found 7%. Some might suggest that had something to do with the
finances,
size of the bank accounts of the various parties. But just stuff that a normal, reasonable person would look at that and say, that's not fair. Something's out of whack here. And so tort reform addressed some of those things, as well as things like phantom damages, not being required to submit evidence of what your costs and actual damages were in order to try to get a larger inflated sum. Third-party funding of litigation may be shocking to you to know that we're all in the engineering industry, right? So we're aware of like private equity. That's a thing in litigation because these nuclear verdicts, I was going to say, are in the millions of dollars. Some of them are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Some of them are in the billions of dollars, billions with a B. And so you have third-party investors, essentially, who invest in a particular lawsuit, hoping to receive a percentage of the damages. And that now has to be disclosed. Those investors have to register with the state. So it's a lot more open, a lot more transparent. Again, not stopping that from happening necessarily, just bringing some sunshine onto those processes. So, great bill. Governor signed it into law 2 weeks ago. And that's a great achievement for, really all Georgians. Everybody has insurance, liability insurance, and everybody's insurance rates have gone up as a result of these nuclear verdicts and these runaway verdicts. And so we all benefit from that, or will benefit from that. And certainly businesses like individuals will benefit from that. So that was the biggest piece of legislation during the legislative session, not just for ACC Georgia. We've been working on that with a coalition of folks throughout the business community for years, but also the biggest as far as like the amount of time and attention that was focused on it. It was a very, I don't want to say controversial issue, but there are strong feelings on both sides of the issue. And because of that, the effort to pass it sucked up a lot of the oxygen during the legislative session. And, just like with all of us, there's only so much bandwidth individuals have. There's only so much, effort and attention that can be paid on things. Yeah. And so because so much was focused on the effort to pass tort reform legislation, there really was less bandwidth and attention available this session than would normally be the case. So a lot of legislation that should have been, easily passed, non-controversial, didn't, because, there just wasn't time and attention to get to everything. So certainly one of our bills that didn't pass, we had 4 priorities, and we passed 3 of the 4 priorities. Again, number 1, tort reform. Number 2 is our legislation that decouples the PE exam from the experience requirement.
Right.
Currently under Georgia law, you have to get your 4 years of experience prior to sitting for and passing the PE exam. That made a lot of sense back in the days when that PE exam was an experiential based exam, where you needed to have the experience to even be able to pass it. But for many years, maybe even decades, it's really been a knowledge based exam. Right. So you have that knowledge.
It makes more sense to take it right after you graduate.
Yeah. It's a test. It's an exam. It makes more sense to take it right after you graduate, just like people, take the bar exam right after they graduate. So there's a logical reason for that. And also one of the intents behind it is making it easier for people to get their PE exam. If you tell me 4 years after I've graduated, I've got to take time out to study for an exam, remind myself of all these things that I learned that don't have anything to do with actual practice, that creates anxiety. So you do that on the front end, you get that anxiety out of the way. Now all you have to do is work and get those 4 years of experience. So none of the requirements change. The requirements are still the same. They're just not, you don't have a do this first, then do that. You can do the things in whatever order works best for you. So
that's really cool.
Yeah. Originally very, very small piece of legislation. It was a page and a half, but legislative process being what it was, it became a 48-page bill. Those kinds of bills are known as Christmas trees. All the ornaments get hung on the Christmas tree. So there were about 6 other pieces of professional licensure-based professional licensure-based legislation that were added to our bill. But fortunately, it was other industries and organizations that we work closely with throughout the year. We're good friends with, and so we were able to kind of combine forces and get the Franken bill passed.
That's great.
And get it into law. Third bill was didn't get a ton of attention, but it's very important. I think we've talked about it in this podcast before. There was a Supreme Court decision last year that came out that said open records requests of companies that are doing business with the state, those requests can be made directly on the company, which creates a huge administrative burden. It creates a lot of risk that something that's not supposed to be disclosed under the law gets disclosed accidentally. Things like business secrets, trade secrets, competitive advantage type information that is not supposed to be disclosed accidentally gets disclosed because the person in the firm doesn't know that it doesn't have to be.
Right.
So this bill corrects that and takes us back to the status quo, which is those requests have to be made on the governmental entity, and the governmental entity responds to the requester on behalf of itself and the contractors or vendors. And then last but not least, our QBS bill, our bill to expand Georgia's current state law and state agency requirement for QBS to be used to procure professional services to the county and city level. We got so close. We got through the House. We got through the Senate. And we were really just in a posture where we were waiting for a bill to pass out of the Senate and cross over to the House.
Yep.
All the House was going to have to do was vote to agree to the Senate's version. And we believe we had it all worked out. And if the Senate hadn't adjourned early, we would have been able to get that bill passed.
Goes to that time frame. You only have so many days to get it passed.
You only have so many days. And then there's so much about the legislative process that's just completely unpredictable.
Right.
Whether it's an issue that comes up in the middle of the session that nobody saw coming, that sucks up a lot of time, or the Senate adjourning several hours before midnight, which nobody saw coming. Although, in defense, the Senate,
they said they were going to.
They said like the day before and the day of and all day the day of that they were going to adjourn early, and unfortunately, that's a little bit like the boy crying wolf.
Right.
They often, one chamber or the other, will say, well, if they're not going to pass our stuff, we're just going to go home. But they almost never do that. But this year, they did.
They did.
And it was one of those reactions you could hear. It was like gasps and what's going on and what just happened. So yeah, that because of that, we were not able to get across the goal line. But the good news is we don't start over back at the beginning.
Right.
This is the first year in a biennial legislative session, so we're basically in a very similar posture when we come back next year. And if the Senate were to vote that bill out on the first day of the legislative session, which they won't, let's manage expectations here, but if they were to pass that bill out, it goes over to the House for an agree, bam, we're done.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So much less legwork for you and Christy Tarallo.
Yes, shout out to Christy Tarallo, our Director of Government Affairs, who couldn't be here with us today. But
she's still recovering from that early dismissal of the Senate.
She was a little traumatized by the early dismissal of the Senate. It was a lot. A lot of people were. But no, shout out to Christy, our Director of Government Affairs, for her tremendous work in handling all these bills and dozens more that we were following or tracking. And keeping us pointed in the right direction down onto the Gold Dome.
Yeah.
Can't thank her enough.
Yeah. I do want to take just a moment before we pivot here to remind everybody that if you are watching this live on LinkedIn or YouTube, you can leave a comment. And if I have everything set up right, we'll see that comment. And
we're simulcasting on YouTube?
We are, yeah.
Wow.
I was able to do that. So
cool.
Yeah.
Well, both of our listeners, hopefully they'll
thanks, Mom.
Comments. Yeah.
Oh, but let's pivot to the national stage for a minute, because Georgia doesn't exist in a vacuum. We are in the middle of unprecedented times in national politics.
I think that's an accurate statement, certainly in the modern era.
Yeah.
And the modern era is complicated and has a lot more levers and pulleys to pull on. Yeah, it's been challenging. Someone asked me recently, how are you keeping your members updated on what's going on with tariffs or whatever? And I'm like, honestly, we're not.
Yeah.
Because
changes daily.
Yeah. Well, it can change within the same day.
Yeah.
Right? A policy can be announced that has significant ramifications, sometimes worldwide ramifications.
Yep.
And then by that afternoon, there's a retraction or a pause or whatever. So an effort to inform in a real-time way actually just confuses.
Yeah.
You get my email about what happened at 9, maybe you don't get the email about what happened at 5, and there's a misunderstanding. So it's something I think we have to think about, because it is our job to inform our members about what's going on and how to navigate it.
Yeah.
Perhaps this podcast becomes more of a regular update on all that has happened.
What is happening?
That's still in place. So a lot of discussion around, we're in the infrastructure business. We design and create all of the things and places where we live, work, and play and drive. So there's been some discussion about infrastructure spending. Some of you who remember back to 2015 when President Trump was running for his first term against Hillary Clinton, there was a race between them, a competition between them. She says, I'm going to spend $500 billion on infrastructure. He said, oh yeah, well, I'm going to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure. And, every week was infrastructure week. There was a lot of discussion about infrastructure, a lot of support for infrastructure funding. Unfortunately, most of that did not come to fruition in the first term, but there's certainly hope that, President Trump, as someone who has campaigned on infrastructure, who understands the need for infrastructure investment, that there'll be some significant funding. The challenge there is we live in a different world.
Yeah.
In 2015 or 2017, I should say, when Congress passed and President Trump signed into law the current tax code with a lot of tax cuts in it, they said, well, we have to pay for these tax cuts. But they were a lot more flexible, we'll just say, in what a pay for was. A lot of times the pay for was, having a 10-year tax bill where all the pay fors don't happen until year 8 and 9 or 9 and 10. So you're sort of pushing the pain out, giving yourself a chance to, we'll fix that before. And we've been We've been impacted by that in the engineering industry. The R&D tax credit is a perfect example of one of those pay fors.
Right.
You used to be able to claim that R&D tax credit in full in the tax year that it occurred, and now you have to amortize that out over 5 years. That's one of the pay fors that was in that previous bill. Well, now, because the size of the deficit or the national debt has ballooned isn't even the right term,
Yeah.
right? As a result of pandemic spending and post-pandemic spending. And so now you have a lot more Republicans in the House and the Senate who are serious about reducing the deficit and paying down on the debt. And so there's certainly reasonable expectation that those pay-fors may have to be more concrete this time. And obviously the president's administration kicked off with massive efforts to cut the cost of the federal government by firing employees, eliminating agencies and departments. So there's no reason to believe in that environment that we're going to see some massive increase in infrastructure spending, and really maybe we'll be fortunate to see, for example, the Transportation Trust Fund reauthorized next year at the same level that it's at or slightly above. So that that certainly creates some questions for us. And then, of course, again, related is the tax bill. Reauthorization of the Transportation Fund is next year. That doesn't happen until, I think, September, have to happen until September next year, 2026. But the tax code, all of those changes that were made in 2017 expire this year. So that has to be dealt with this year. And while that sounds like dealing with tax law, and it is, some of those things can have a positive or a negative impact on our industry. So you've still got the problem of the R&D tax credit that we just talked about, but then there's things that are in jeopardy. There's a 20% pass-through deduction for engineering firms that's in the current tax code and was in the previous tax code. Does that stay in, or does that become one of those things that becomes a pay-for? A lot of uncertainty around that, and very little light has been shed on what that tax package might look like. Congress is certainly is currently working on a framework. Agreeing to a framework, but a framework is not details. A framework is kind of big picture. So that's something that we'll be watching closely, and our colleagues at ACC National in Washington, D.C. will be spending most, if not all, of their time monitoring. So that's definitely a lot of things that could impact our businesses, both specifically and generally. What do those impacts have on the overall economy? So a lot of uncertainty there. And one thing that businesses hate is uncertainty. Make the rules whatever you want the rules to be. Tell me what the rules are going to be, and then I will respond accordingly. I will navigate I will play the game that you have put before me. But not knowing what the rules are or what they're going to be, does present some challenges. And, closely related to that for our industry are the discussions around tariffs. One of those things, happens in the morning and then something happens in the afternoon to change it. But the cost of materials.
How do you plan a project if you don't know?
If you're a state agency that's building, vertical construction or transportation infrastructure, how can you budget for that? How can you project into multiple years what projects are going to cost? You're already, these agencies are already grappling with inflation for the last several years, increasing the cost of building things. But now you've got this total uncertainty in the future about what those costs are going to be, what those, how that affects budgets. I mean, the more money I have to spend on this project, the less money I have to spend on other projects. And so you may have projects that, keep getting pushed out because the cost of building them
have to pay for it
has
somehow.
been impacted. And then, of course, if those tariffs have an overall economic impact, like a recession, the overall economy also affects projects. It affects your revenue, how much revenue is being generated. If people aren't driving as much, there's not as much motor fuel tax being generated. People aren't, going out and buying stuff. T-Splost revenue is reduced. So a lot of uncertainty, and perhaps unprecedented uncertainty. Certainly in my lifetime, there's never been this much uncertainty that affects business. And we'll keep on top of it. Our folks at ACC National in Washington, D.C.
I was going to say, if folks wanted to get signed up to get those updates from National, they would just go on the National website and I think log into their member portal there. And
acec.org, log into your member portal. If you don't have a member portal, reach out to us, or I'm sure there's a contact us on the ACC National website. But that's a great resource. And that's a great resource, not just in the context of these things that we're talking about. But even before all this, it's a great, regular, well-researched, well-documented snapshot of where the economy is and where it's projected to go.
And how it will affect your industry,
right.
the engineering industry. Right. It's not just general. It's how this affects you.
Yeah. You guys, maybe not all ACC Georgia members or ACC members, but probably most of you are. This is your resource. This is your trade organization fighting for you, working for you, doing research to present good, actionable economic data to you. And so, log on to the website, sign up for those things. It's a tremendous resource for our members to have regular inputs, data that they can use to plan, the near term and medium term and long term future for their firms.
Yeah. Speaking of planning the future, next week we will not be talking about politics because we'll have the ACEC Georgia Junior Board in here talking about career paths and kind of as a young professional navigating the industry, what they're looking for, what to expect, their kind of paths that they've trodden, and their future paths. And so we'll have them in studio. I'll be working the board, but I will not be moderating. They will even have their own moderator. So
is that because you're too old, Brett?
That's because I'm not a young professional. I know.
Well, you are a professional.
I am.
I will qualify that. Yeah. You are a professional, but maybe not as young as you used to be.
Yeah, I can't hide it anymore. I'm just...
Well, don't feel bad.
You. I'm old.
Well, I was just going to say, don't feel bad because you're in like the over the line category. I'm not even allowed in the room.
Yeah, I mean
they told me I probably shouldn't even come into the office that day.
It's weird that they keep calling you grandpa.
It's hurtful because I don't even actually have any grandchildren, and so it's hurtful. But I've learned to just kind of roll with it.
Yeah, gotta
just kind of roll with it. But no, that'll be if you're listening. Well, you are if you're hearing my words. Self-fulfilling prophecy there.
100% of people who heard you say that were listening. Yeah.
Yes. That may sound like something that young professionals need to log in and listen to.
Yeah.
And it is. It is definitely something young professionals ought to log into and ought to listen to and ought to consider plugging into ACC Georgia's Young Professionals Network.
But if you manage any young professionals.
Exactly. If you are someone, and pretty much anybody who's not a young professional is someone who is responsible for managing young professionals, I can just tell you from experience, the junior board has provided tremendous insights about what today's younger generation is expecting in the workplace, what their cultural expectations are, what they're not getting.
Yeah.
They're not just giving their personal experience, but they're giving their friends and their colleagues' perspectives. Folks, in some cases, who've left the engineering industry altogether because of what they weren't getting and needed in their firms.
In fact, one of the persons on this next week's panel is someone who is a PE, started off as a PE, but switched to a different role within the engineering industry still, but she's no longer doing the engineering work. She's doing other work.
Still a licensed professional engineer.
Still a licensed professional
engineer. Just some tremendous insights. And just not to spoil it, because there'll be about 30 others, but like one thing we don't do well as an industry is show career paths.
Yeah.
Here's what you're doing right now, but you're not going to be doing this forever.
Yeah.
Unless you want to.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to, here are these other options. A lot of those people who are leaving our industry, not going to another firm, but leaving engineering altogether,
feel stuck.
They don't. Yeah. That no one has told them what their options are or how they would pursue them. They think what they're doing right now is kind of a version of what they're going to be doing forever, and so they're leaving the industry. And that's the easiest employee to get is one you've already got.
Yeah.
Just keep them. So some great insights about employee retention, how to build a culture that fosters employee retention and attraction.
Yep.
Just some really good stuff. So it's not just for the 35 and under professionals. It's for everybody.
It's for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, we will see you next week for sure. Or at least I will. Sully may not be here. I believe you are traveling again next week.
The next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But tune in next week. That Tuesday morning, I think they're planning on going on about 10 a.m. And so we will be here broadcasting that. You can also always listen to us after the fact, either on YouTube, social media platform, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to us on audio too. If you are listening to this after the fact, why don't you give us a rate and a follow and a like and whatever your platform calls it, because it really does help us. It helps us reach new people, reach new audiences that aren't already listening to us. And with that, Sully, got any famous last words? No. Okay.
Subscribe. If you're listening and you haven't subscribed to the podcast, subscribe to the podcast so you can listen to it at your leisure.
At your leisure.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And as Brett mentioned at the top end, we're going to do a better job of providing a consistent, regular cadence of every other week for our podcasts, and
twice a month.
Twice a month.
At least.
Yeah.
Well, folks, until next time, I'm Brett.
I'm Sully.
And we'll see you later.